Before we begin, please hit the like, subscribe, and notification bell so you don't miss a single one of our upcoming videos. Buck Owens was born August 12, 1929, on a farm in Sherman, Texas, to Alvis Edgar Owens Sr. and Macy Azell Ellington. In the biography about Buck, Rich Kienzle writes, Buck was a donkey on the Owens farm. When Alvis Jr. was 3 or 4 years old, he walked into the house and announced that his name was also Buck. That was fine with the family, and the boy's name became Buck from then on. He attended public school for grades 1 through 3 in Garland, Texas. Owens' family moved to Mesa, Arizona in 1937 during the Dust Bowl and Great Depression. Now, it was while attending school in Arizona, Owens found that while he disliked formal schoolwork, he could often satisfy class requirements by singing or performing in school plays. As a result, he began to take part in such activities when he could. Now, Buck Owens was a self-taught musician and singer. Owens became proficient on guitar, mandolin, horns, and drums. When he obtained his first electric steel guitar, he taught himself to play it after his father adapted an old radio into an amplifier. Now, Owens quit school in the 9th grade in order to help work on his father's farm and pursue a musical career. It was in 1945 he co-hosted a radio show called Buck and Brent. Co-hosts Terrell, Ray Britton, and Owens also played at local bars, where owners usually allowed them and a third member of their band to pass the hat during a show and keep 10% of the proceeds. They eventually became the resident musicians at a Phoenix bar called the Romeo Buffet. In the late 1940s, Owens became a truck driver, a job which took him through the San Joaquin Valley of California, where he first experienced and was impressed by the town of Bakersfield. He and his first wife eventually settled there in 1951. Now, soon, Owens was frequently traveling to Hollywood for session recording jobs at Capitol Records, playing backup for Tennessee Ernie Ford, Wanda Jackson, Tommy Collins, Tommy Duncan, and many others. Using the pseudonym Corky Jones to prevent the recording of a rock and roll tune from hurting his aspiring country music career, Owens recorded a rockabilly record called Hot Dog for the Pep label. Now, it was sometime in the 1950s he lived with his second wife and children in Fife, Washington, where he sang with the Dusty Rhodes Band. In 1958, Owens met Don Rich in Steve Gay's 90s restaurant in South Tacoma, Washington. Owens had observed one of Rich's shows and immediately approached him about collaborating, after which Rich began playing fiddle with Owens at local venues. They were featured on the weekly Bar K Jamboree on KTNT TV 11. In 1959, Owens' career took off when his song Second Fiddle hit number 24 on the Billboard Country chart. Soon after, Under Your Spell Again made it to number 4 on the charts, and Capitol Records wanted Owens to return to Bakersfield, California. Now, following their success, Owens tried unsuccessfully to convince Rich to accompany him to Bakersfield. Instead, Rich opted to go to become a music teacher at Centrilla College. While there, he tutored on the side, but continued playing local venues. In December 1960, however, he left to rejoin Owens in Bakersfield. Above and Beyond hit number 3 on April 2, 1960. Owens performed the song on ABC TV's Ozark Jubilee. Now, it was in early 1963 the Johnny Russell song Act Naturally was pitched to Owens, who initially didn't like it. His guitarist and longtime collaborator Don Rich, however, enjoyed it and convinced Owens to record it with the Buckaroos. Laid down on February 12, 1963, it was released on March 11th and entered the charts on April 13th. By June 15th, the single began its first of 4 non-consecutive weeks at the number 1 position, Owens' first top hit. The Beatles recorded a cover of it in 1965 with Ringo Starr as lead. Starr later recorded a duet of it with Owens in 1988. Now, Owens' 1966 album Carnegie Hall Concert was a smash hit and further cemented Buck Owens as a top country band. It achieved crossover success on the pop charts, reinforced by R&B singer Ray Charles, releasing cover versions of 2 of Owens' songs that became hits that year, Crying Time Again and Together Again. In 1967, Owens and the Buckaroos toured Japan, a then rare occurrence for a country act. The subsequent live album, Buck Owens and His Buckaroos in Japan, was an early example of a country band recording outside the United States. Owens and the Buckaroos performed at the White House for President Lyndon Johnson in 1968, which was later released as a live album. Between 1968 and 1969, pedal steel guitar player Tom Brumley and drummer Willie Cantu left the band, replaced by J.D. Manis and Jerry Wiggins. Owens and the Buckaroos had 2 songs reach number 1 on the country music charts in 1969, Tall Dark Stranger and Who's Gonna Mow Your Grass. In 1969, they recorded a live album, Live in London, where they premiered their rock song, A Happening in a London Town, and their version of Chuck Berry's song, Johnny Be Good. During this time, Hee Haw, starring Owens and the Buckaroos, was at its height of popularity. The series, originally envisioned as a country music version of Rowan and Martin's Laugh-In, went on to run in various incarnations for 231 episodes over 24 seasons. Creedence Clearwater Revival mentioned Owens by name in their 1970 single, Looking Out My Back Door. Also between 1968 and 1970, Owens made guest appearances on top TV variety programs, including The Dean Martin Show, The Ed Sullivan Show, The Jackie Gleason Show, and 7 times on The Jimmy Dean Show. Now, it was in early 1970s that Owens and the Buckaroos enjoyed a string of hit duets with his protege, Susan Rae, who subsequently became a popular solo artist with Owens as her producer. In 1971, the Buckaroos' bass guitarist, Doyle Holly, left the band to pursue a solo career. Holly was known for his booming deep voice on solo ballads. His departure was a setback to the band, as Doyle had received the Bass Player of the Year award from the Academy of Country Music the year before, and served as co-lead vocalist along with Don Rich of the Buckaroos. Holly went on to record 2 solo records in the early 1970s. Both were top 20 hits. Owens and Rich were the only members left of the original band, and in the 1970s they struggled to top the country music charts. However, the popularity of Hee Haw was allowing them to enjoy large crowds at indoor arenas. After 3 years of not having a number 1 song, Owens and the Buckaroos finally had another number 1 hit, Made in Japan, in 1972. The band had been without pedal steel since late 1969, when Manis departed. In April, he added pedal steel guitarist Jerry Brightman, and Owens returned to his grassroots sound of fiddle, steel, and electric guitars, releasing a string of singles including Arms Full of Empty, Ain't It Amazing Gracie, Ain't Gonna Have Old Buck to Kick Around Anymore. Owens' original version of The Streets of Bakersfield was released in 1972. On July 17, 1974, Owens' best friend and Buckaroos guitarist Don Rich was killed when he lost control of his motorcycle and struck a guardrail on Highway 1 in Morro Bay, where he was to have joined his family for vacation. Owens was devastated. He was like a brother, a son, a best friend, he said in the late 1990s, something I'd never said before. maybe I couldn't. But I think my music life ended when he died. Oh yeah, I carried on and I existed. But the real joy and love, the real lightning and thunder is gone forever. Owens would never fully recover from the tragedy, either emotionally or professionally. Before the 1960s ended, Owens and manager Jack McFadden began to concentrate on Owens' financial future. He bought several radio stations, including KNIX-AM, later KCWW, and KNIX-FM in Phoenix and KUSS-FM in Bakersfield. During the 1990s, Owens was co-owner of the country music network Real Country, of which the Owens-owned station, KCWW, was the flagship station. In 1998, Owens sold KCWW to ABC Disney for $8,850,000 and sold KNIX-FM to Clear Channel Communications, but he maintained ownership of KUZZ until his death. Owens established Buck Owens Enterprises and produced records by several artists. He recorded for Warner Brothers Records, but by the 1980s, he was no longer recording, instead devoting his time to overseeing his business empire from Bakersfield. He left Hee-Haw in 1986. Now, country artist Dwight Yoakam was largely influenced by Owens' style of music and teamed up with him for a duet of Streets of Bakersfield in 1988. It was Owens' first #1 single in 16 years. In an interview, Yoakam described the first time he met with Owens. We sat there that day in 1987 and talked about my music to that point, my short career, and what I'd been doing and how he'd been watching me. I was really flattered and thrilled to know that this legend had been keeping an eye on me. Owens also collaborated with Cletus T. Judd on the song The First Redneck on the Internet in 1988, in which Owens also appeared in the music video. The 1990s saw a flood of reissues of Owens' Capitol recordings on compact disc, the publishing rights to which Owens had bought back in 1974 as part of his final contract with the label. His albums had been out of print for nearly 15 years, when he released a retrospective box set in 1990. Encouraged by brisk sales, Owens struck a distribution deal with Sunday's Records of New York, which specialized in reissuing obscure recordings. The bulk of his Capitol catalog was reissued on CD in 1995, 1997, and in 2005. In August 1999, Owens brought back together the remaining members of his original Buckaroo band to help him celebrate his 70th birthday at his Crystal Palace in Bakersfield. Owens, Doyle, Holly, Tom Brumley, and Willie Cantu performed old hits from their heyday, including Tiger by the Tail and Act Naturally. Long before Owens became the famous co-host of Hee-Haw, his band became known for their signature Bakersfield sound, later emulated by artists such as Merle Haggard, Dwight Yoakam, and Brad Paisley. Buck inspired indie country songwriter and friend Terry Frawley, whose band, the Nudie Cowboys, possessed a similar sound. Now, it was following the death of Rich that Owens' later trademark became a red, white, and blue acoustic guitar, along with a 1974 Pontiac convertible Nudie Mobile, adorned with pistols and silver dollars. A similar car created by Nudie Cohen for Elvis Presley and later won by Owens in a bet is now enshrined behind the bar at Owens' Crystal Palace nightclub in Bakersfield. Owens would hand out replicas of his trademark acoustic guitar to friends, acquaintances, and fans. Each would contain a gold plaque with the name of the recipient. Some of these guitars cost $1,000 and up. Now, looking at Owens' personal life, Owens was married 4 times, 3 ending in divorce and 1 in annulment. He married country singer Bonnie Campbell Owens in 1948. The couple had 2 sons, one of which was Buddy Allen, and they separated in 1951 and later divorced. Owens married Phyllis Buford in 1956, with whom he had a third son. In 1977, he wed Buckaroo's fiddle player, Jana J. Griff. Within a few days, he filed for an annulment, then changed his mind. The couple continued the on and off marriage for a year before divorcing. In 1979, he married Jennifer Smith. Owens had 3 sons, Buddy Allen, Johnny, and Michael Owens. Owens successfully recovered from oral cancer in the early 1990s, but had additional health problems near the end of the 1990s, including pneumonia, a minor stroke in 2004. These health problems had forced him to curtail his regular weekly performances with the Buckaroos at his Crystal Palace. Owens died in his sleep of an apparent heart attack at his ranch just north of Bakersfield on March 25, 2006, only hours after performing at his club. He was 76 years old. Thanks to our sponsor, Kevin from Pittsburgh, who made this video possible. I didn't forget the H this time, Hoss.